in transportation organizations. It is designed for, but not limited to, staff within human resources, engineering, research, planning, or information technology functions who are interested in starting up a knowledge management initiative or pilot and want to gain an operational understanding of what would be involved. These 2 sessions will provide stories and information from professionals who have implemented knowledge management in their organizations. And just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded and posted online on the NETWC.net website. The direct link will be forthcoming in the webinar following the email, follow-up in your email. So also, please use the chat pod to ask questions, which we will then collect and answer at the end of all the presentations. So first up, we have Alex Lithicum, who leads the Knowledge Management Program at the USDOT Volpe National Transportation Systems Center. He is responsible for enabling 1,100 federal employees and contractors across more than 20 business units to find who and what they need when they need it. Mr. Linthicum leads both client-facing and internal programs and projects focused on strategy, knowledge management, and planning. Mr. Linthicum has degrees in systems engineering and urban planning from University of Virginia. Alex?
Thank you, Becky. I think I gave you a shortened bio this time. Not short enough still. We'll keep working on that. Thank you all for joining us today to hear about what some of our groups have done with knowledge management, and hopefully give you some tips on what your organizations can do, and we can all share information and learn together. I'll warn you, if you're allergic to peanuts, you may want to stand a couple feet back from your computer screen. The whole idea of peanut butter and jelly is that, what are things that go really well together? Peanut butter and jelly, Romeo and Juliet, shoes and socks. But the point here is that when we hear the word knowledge management, sometimes it has a very different meaning to different people, depending on where they're coming from, what their organization's needs are. And the focus of my presentation today, and really what we've been working on in our organization, is understanding who we are and what our needs are, and trying not to get too caught up in what knowledge management means to other people. It's important and it's great to get ideas, but let's see here. Let's see. Becky, am I sharing my screen? I think so.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right, back to back here. Now you can stand back from your screen a little bit. Okay. All right. So what we're really doing is focusing on who we are and what our needs are. And I think that's, if you take any message away today, it's that it's going to be hard to learn what you need to do from a textbook or from someone else, and you really need to look within to get what your own requirements are. And I'm going to hopefully get into a little bit of that and help you think about it. So 4 tips. Understand your organization, identify your knowledge assets, decide what you want to do with your knowledge assets, and then communicate often. These are really boiled down tips, and of course there's a lot more. So first, understand your organization. What am I talking about here? All of our organizations have different missions and different cultures, different organizational structures. What jobs do people do? This is really, really important. And within an organization, different people do different jobs. And so what knowledge is important to different people in the organization are going to value different types of knowledge. They're going to need different types of knowledge to do their jobs. They're going to value it differently. And what may be important to your director or your executive director may not be important to 40% of your workforce, or vice versa. That's not to say that some knowledge is more or less important than others, but it's just acknowledging the fact that different people have different values, and I think that becomes really important as you go on. So, but what jobs do people do, and then what knowledge do they need to do their jobs? And then it might be an interesting exercise to look around and see what programs and activities are already related to sort of knowledge management. I'll add here another tip. Again, I've sort of beaten this to a dead horse, beaten this to death, that you have to know your own organizations. But it's been very interesting for us to compare and contrast other organizations, going and visiting them and learning more about who they are and what they do, but then coming back and saying, okay, they do things the way they do because of who they are, and then thinking about what the difference is between who they are and who we are, and that really helps get the juices flowing. All right, so in order for some of this to make sense then, I do want to tell you a little bit about who we are. The Volpe Center is part of U.S. Department of Transportation. We're part of the Office of the Secretary. We've got about 550 federal employees and over 400 on-site contractors. We're fee-for-service, so we don't get money from Congress. We're not a research organization, but we do applied work for other partners and agencies. So we're currently working with 25 federal agencies on over 1,600 projects. We also work with foreign, state, and local governments. But this sort of sets the stage for what knowledge management means at Volpe. We've got 1,600 projects going on, and showing on this slide, we've got 950 employees and contractors that we've got to kind of all keep aware of what's going on. So it gives you a sense of the breadth and a little bit of what our challenge is. We also have specialists in many different and many different disciplines: planners, scientists, economists, analysts, engineers, IT folks. And all this is to say is that there's a lot of different people with different specialties, and part of my job is to help try and make connections and help people find each other in the organization. So I've talked a little bit about how we're fee-for-service. We're project-based, so we work, a lot of our work is for other folks. But we're customer-focused, and this we're customer focused, but what this also means is we're so focused on our customers that we don't necessarily focus on ourselves internally, and that's one of our challenges. If a staff person has an hour to spend, chances are they're going to spend that hour working for a customer or a partner rather than documenting knowledge internally. So that's the environment and the constraint that we're working within. I mentioned how we're diverse, and also we have implicit roles and responsibilities. So we're a very flat organization, and we don't have a lot of, okay, you're this role, you do that job. There's a lot of sort of flexibility in terms of seniority and the things that are expected of people. So when it comes back to knowledge management and trying to track information and data and knowledge around and about our organization, it's not as necessarily as cut and dry as simply assigning roles and responsibilities. So hopefully some of me telling you about us will make you think a little bit about who you are and what your challenges and constraint opportunities are. Okay, so knowledge management means, I think it means different things to different people. And I've tried to define this very simply in our organization, because I think people hear the word knowledge management and they get sort of turned off. So I like to think of this as selling the benefit. Knowledge management is helping people find who or what they're looking for when they need it. And so this is how we try and describe it. Some other things that have been helpful along the way as we consider our organization and what knowledge management means to us. We've developed some guiding principles. This has taken us several years to put these together, and to really sort of realize what these are. So it's not as easy as putting 6 bullets on a slide, but some guiding principles that we think of when we think about knowledge management and we think about the activities that we take on and how we formulate our approaches to some of the problems that we're trying to solve. So our guiding principles, we're trying to daylight or democratize data. We're trying to get as much data and information and knowledge out into the open as possible so that people can poke it. People are finding bugs or mistakes in some of our data and information all the time, and that's great. That's exactly what I want to happen, because we need to get a culture so that people report it and we can fix it all and make it better. We are trying to get as much value as we can from existing assets. So we really, like in our knowledge management program actually does focus a lot on data and information, which are a little bit different than knowledge. We are not going to try to document everything that's in every one of our employees' heads. For us, we think this is untenable. So instead, what we're trying to do is use the information about what staff have worked on in the past, what they're currently working on. We're trying to use the data and information about our organization to help people make connections and to find the person that they need to talk to get the knowledge. It's a little indirect, but again, based on what our sort of baseline conditions and environment and constraints are, it's what we think is tenable for us. So along these lines, we're trying to minimize burden on staff. We're trying to reuse as much data information as we can to point to the right people. We're trying to not have staff have to provide a lot of care and feeding to some system or to even a soft process. And then we're trying to make information easy to find. I've got some other points here. We've been experimenting with this idea that anything related to internal communications is actually knowledge management by a different word. And maybe I'll come back to that in a second. So, all right, the next point here is identify your knowledge assets. And I talked a little bit earlier about, well, what jobs do people do and what knowledge do people need to do their jobs? We went through a series of exercises where we really poked those questions. We had a series of focus groups, and we really boiled those down, and we identified the pieces of knowledge that we really need to do our jobs. I've heard this also called a knowledge assessment, or like a baseline knowledge assessment. A knowledge audit, that was another, I think NASA called it a knowledge audit. What is the current, so if you identify what your organization's most important knowledge assets are, what's the current state of them? Where are they today? Where do you want them to go to? And then you can start to think about strategy. Okay, how do we get from where we are today to where we want to go to? And a really great article that was inspiration for us was in the Harvard Business Review. It's now a couple years old, but you know, it took us several years into a knowledge management program before we undertook defining what our knowledge assets were. But reading this article, it was like it should have been obvious. It's the starting point. How can you manage your knowledge until you know what it is that you're trying to manage? So it was an aha moment, and hopefully one to help everybody. So we did identify 6 assets. Our staff skills and experiences. Who are we and what do we know? Who are the folks that we work with, both the people and the organizations? We're constantly doing all these projects, so we've got a lot of knowledge that we're learning from the projects. How do we get things done internally, internal processes and resources, and then what's going on outside in the big world, industry trends. So these are the things that we need to know and stay on top of. Okay, so once you know what your assets are, what are you going to do with them? I'm going to come back to this list in a second. So the article that I just mentioned gave a framework. And the authors suggested this two-dimensional framework for thinking about your knowledge assets and mapping them. So are they structured or unstructured? Are these things that are in people's heads unstructured? Or are they in some sort of a database or an information system? Are they structured? And then you could put them on what's the x-axis down here, diffused or undiffused. Is this information that just one person has, or is it knowledge that's shared fully throughout the organization? And we've gone through an exercise to map where we are with our knowledge assets and where we want them to be. And this has helped us be thinking about, well, what do we really want to be? What are we trying to document in systems? What are we trying to share informally? We have an annual internal conference every year and some other methods of sharing information. But what are the different tactics that we can take to get from point A to point B? So going back, what do you do once you identify your knowledge assets? What do you do? Again, who needs what knowledge? How often do they need it? What needs to be structured or unstructured or dispersed or undispersed? How staff can staff find knowledge, and how do they want to? And then these three questions are kind of what I just went into with the two-dimensional graph, but current state, future state, and getting from one to the other. So in order to document this current state, future state, and getting from one to the other, here's a screenshot of a report that we did that documents each one of these 6 assets. And it talks about what it is. It describes how it supports our business and our organization. This map of all the dots and bubbles shows how we've mapped our different knowledge assets to the different jobs that we do, and also the different people in our organization who do those jobs. So you could look at this and see, if nothing else, that different people in our organization do different jobs. I bet you we all are familiar with that. And that this piece of information, a piece of knowledge, which happens to be staff skills and experiences, we think is probably most important to these business functions, and that we can see how that maps over to the different roles in the organization. So it's a mapping. It's a way for us just to get our arms around this and have some discussions. We've also talked about we've written up a paragraph about baseline conditions, desired conditions, and then tactics. Okay, so how do we get from those baseline conditions to the desired conditions? And we've done this for each one of our knowledge assets that we had identified. So if you're looking for an idea of how to structure some of your thinking, here's one approach. There may be others. Speaking of approaches, just another thing that has been on my mind lately is back to those tactics. Maybe this is just another way of thinking about the same sort of problem. So maybe you're a more visual person, and the last more report format wasn't doing it. So we've identified our knowledge assets, and then we can map them out in certain ways. So what information about those assets do we already have and can be reused? What information do we need to collect completely fresh? What information is in people's heads, but it hasn't been recorded, and maybe we don't want to record it. Maybe it's too much work. In the private sector, I've heard that people don't want to record information because they could lose competitive advantage. Once you write something on paper or put it in a spreadsheet or a document or in an email, it can be shared very easily, and you can lose your competitive advantage. So just something to think about. In our case, it's more of an issue of what resources do we want to put towards recording what's in people's heads. But anyway, once we identify what can be reused, what do we need to create, what exists that we might want to index but we don't necessarily want to completely flesh out, then we can turn our attention to strategies for how we find and access that knowledge. So just another approach. Something else that we've done is put together an organizational taxonomy that we're now taking a lot of our knowledge assets and as well as our data and our information, and we're tying information that used to be floating around in different databases or file folders or places in the organization, and we're tying it back to this, to a taxonomy. So we can, so anything, maybe an article that was written about a project, a deliverable that came out of a project, all of the labor data or financial information that's associated with a project, all the project files. We're actually building a platform that we can find all of that stuff in one place. It used to be dispersed. And we can actually, that's just the project, a project example, but we can do that for the different parts of our organization and even staff. We've got staff pages where we pull information in and create a sort of profile of sorts. Here's some screenshots of that. This is, I don't expect anybody to read it. This happens to be from one of our division pages, so it shows the new agreements that have come in that division and we've got deliverables and we've got projects, and we've got some information here. This isn't the end goal. I mean, the idea here is that you would go to this. It's a tool to simply help you find other projects or other people, specifically other people that you could pick up the phone and talk to. Okay. All right. So that's probably enough to get started, and we're doing a lot of. We're still working on all of these things and refining. But I have to continue to remind myself to communicate often in the organization and really make sure that we're demonstrating value and showing how we're creating value in the organization. So communicate often. So just 3 questions that any program manager would want to think about is what did you accomplish last year? What are you working on now? What's next up? And then my question for you all is, when's the last time that you told anybody about this? That's my question for myself also. I just jotted it all down, but the next time I'm in the elevator with our director, I want to make sure I've got something exciting to talk about. And more on communications. Again, I started off by saying I personally think that the term knowledge management is kind of opaque. It means different things to different people. So if there's any advice or tips, it's to really devise a message that works in your organization. Some ones that we've tried are, connecting people with people or empowering staff to find what they need. Yours may be different. Our group is trying to lead by example, and we're trying to share to the greatest extent possible. I just talked a few minutes ago about telling people what you're doing and how it's helping them, and make friends with your internal communications team because they can help you spread your message. And remember, internal communications is knowledge management. Maybe you'll find that to be the same. Here's some other things that we have going on that I didn't talk about very much that's part of our program. And if anybody would like to have any questions or want to contact us about what we're doing and just maybe talk through some of what you're doing, that would be great. My name is Alex Lincecum at the US DOT Volpe Center, and I'll hand it back to Becky. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. We're already getting questions for you on the chat pod, but we're going to wait till the end to answer those because we've allotted a lot of time at the end for questions. So I hope everyone stays on and through the next presentation, and then we'll take your questions. So next, we have Molly Johnson and Kathy Schumann. Molly Johnson is responsible for directing the corporate communications program for Dewberry, a 2,000-person engineering firm. She oversees a team of communications and graphics professionals and interfaces regularly with leadership on internally and externally facing initiatives. Molly recently directed the implementation of Dewberry's social intranet and is currently leading knowledge identification, collection, and transfer activities. She also has responsibility for cultural initiatives, strategic planning efforts, acquisition integrations, and branding. She has 20 years of experience with professional services firms and is a graduate of Davidson College of North Carolina. She has been a guest columnist and contributing author for multiple architecture, engineering industry publications. And Kathy Schumann leads employee communications at Mead Hunt, a nationwide design consulting firm with 550 employees who have diverse expertise and experiences. She is an 18-year veteran of the company, growing her communication skills on the marketing team before taking on the firm's internal communications role. Kathy is responsible for generating employee engagement with regard to knowledge management. She analyzes communication processes for the best fit with the company culture. So now I'm going to turn it over to Molly and Kathy. I believe Molly is going first.
That's right. And thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. And I hope everyone can see my screen now. Thank you, Alex, for that great foundation. I think everything that you said is so important, and especially about, how do you get started? And I think what Kathy and I, hope you'll take away from our presentation is just a couple of approaches about how do you get started. Now, Dewberry's is much more aligned with a formal strategy, actual strategic plan, but I really feel like anybody can do this kind of thing, even if you don't have a formal plan in place. It's really about aligning with your organizational needs, aligning with what you perceive as problems or issues, and that's where you can, get in there and start to make some changes. So first of all, just a little bit about Dewberry. We are a nationwide professional consulting firm. A large portion of our business is in the transportation sector. We are predominantly located on the East Coast, but we are continuing to grow west, as you can see. We've been in business for more than 60 years, and our headquarters is in Fairfax, Virginia. So like I said, getting our knowledge management program off the ground at Dewberry was really driven by two tactics that came out of our very formal strategic plan. One was about improving internal communications, because since we are a professional services firm, we really need our employees to know what each other does. We really need to work on how we can best solve our clients' problems, and we need to share information constantly. The other piece was enhancing our client intelligence and managing our information capabilities. And much like Alex mentioned, one of the action items in this tactic was about improving our data that we had on our projects, our people, our clients, the lessons that we're taking from all of our engagements with clients. And part of our process was to daylight that information to make it more available to employees. So after we identified these main core elements of the strategic plan, we spent a fair amount of time researching and trying to find out, okay, well, how would we want to approach this? And a big part of it was improving our technology. And so we did a fair amount of research, not just within our sector, meaning the architectural and engineering community, but we also looked outside of our sector. But we ended up landing on a program that was built specifically for our industry. It integrated immediately out of the box with the existing databases that we held, so there wasn't going to be any transference of data. Like I said, it was industry specific. We also felt like it was very intuitive, because as we were trying to get employees to share information with each other and use the data that we currently held in a lot of our databases, we wanted to make it easy for them to find, easy for them to validate and improve. And so we needed it to be very intuitive. We also felt like it would need to be highly scalable to support a lot of our existing and future communications needs. So fast forward about a year after we actually purchased the system, we launched on January 4th, 2016, and we had a really good feeling that people would be open to the system, that they would be open to asking questions and sharing. But frankly, I think even the team was blown away by the initial response. Employees would ask questions about the system, and before the team could respond, they were answering each other's questions. And that has continued to improve. They were validating their data, as the statistic shows. In about 8 months' time, over 800 employee records were updated because they were now more readily available to the employee. They were able to review it and submit edits to our data management team. So now that we have this in place, we really wanted to look at how we could start to drill down into where we wanted to improve. Excuse me. So we really wanted to improve information sharing. This seemed like employees were ready to do this. We wanted to build on some of this initial success, and we heard over and over from our employees that they really wanted to understand what each other does. I mean, among 50 plus offices, there's a lot of project work that's going on, and there's a lot of capabilities where they can draw on each other's experience, and they really wanted to understand what was happening and how they could work with each other and learn from each other. And then how could this system ultimately better support our clients? How could we more easily draw expertise together so that it can benefit our clients? So about 6 months after launch, we did kind of a relatively informal poll with some key people in our organization. We had some one-on-one interviews with them, and we wanted to understand what are they looking for in the system? And so this is from a senior vice president. She said that, one of the benefits she immediately saw from this platform was that she was able to very quickly dig into somebody's resume and understand this person's experience. And while the resumes gave a lot of information, we were also looking for other capabilities and experience that employees could help each other with, that they could share. And so we went around and targeted about 600 of our employees. So these are what we would consider project and task management staff. We set up a very brief training session to show them how they could improve their profile information and how they could explain to others how they could be a resource. So now we are about 1.5 years into the system, and we were able to get about 766 employees actually adding data to their profiles, sharing what are they a resource for, how can they help somebody within the organization. We also heard that, like I said, that our employees are really wanting to find internal expertise. And so we started a hashtag trending topic called Expertise Wanted. And this is just basically a way for someone to ask a question and get the question answered by somebody else within the organization. We also feel like this was very important as a building block for building trust, that if people felt like they would be comfortable asking a question about something they don't know, or if they need an additional resource, that if they could put that out in the social component of our intranet and have that answered, we could build more trust across the different geographies. So in 2016, we had about 35 questions that were asked and answered. Now we're up to about 82. The team that manages our intranet makes sure that these are tagged appropriately as an expertise wanted question, and we also make sure that they're answered. So some of the time we even go behind the scenes, talk to people, say, do you know the answer to this? Could you weigh in here and help out your fellow employee? So we're continuing to build on what we've learned. We see that our employees are becoming more and more open to sharing, to asking questions, to improving their information, and digging into each other's data. But we have a basic hypothesis that this continued sharing might lead to more questions about a project solution, or frankly something that they may not know but might be a little shy to ask. And so we're trying to build even more openness and vulnerability among our employees through this process, so that they can start to share more lessons learned and build on the overall knowledge of the organization. So that's about it for me. I'm going to pass it off to Kathy now, so she can share with you the story of NETWC.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Molly. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And I'll get ready to share here. And I'm hoping everybody can see the screen. So I'm Kathy Schumann from Mead and Hunt, and our story is a little different from Dewberry's in the sense that we didn't really start with a specific strategy for knowledge management. In fact, if I were to title our story, I'd call it Overcoming Intolerable Problems. So as a firm, we're still kind of new to the whole KM discussion, specifically a few years ago, but even now this is a bit of a fresh concept for many of our folks. But we did have a lot of communication and process issues that were sort of hard to battle through. So in that sense, we sort of fell into knowledge management as a process. Just to give you a little context of who we are, we have been in operations since 1900. We have about 550 employees we're up to now in 30 offices across the country. And of course, that's a bit of a barrier to efficiency in sharing information. We have a growing number of telecommuters. We also have a growing number of staff who are working across markets and divisions and that sort of thing, and so that also was a driver for us to really look at how we're sharing information, how our processes are in place. So that was a big issue and kind of looking forward to making some significant changes. So kind of back to our intolerable problems. So there was a lack of interest in our technological systems. We have some systems in place already that actually we're still using at the time that we went live with this kind of our solution or our starting solution for knowledge management. But those systems weren't, a lot of employees didn't enjoy using them. The searching was really difficult in terms of participating, adding to the conversation, putting information back in. That wasn't happening. So those sort of things were something we had to overcome. In addition, we had a, rightfully so, lack of confidence in our intranet at the time. It was really spotty in the type of information that was out there. In addition, it was sort of shut down, I guess, to certain people being able to put stuff on. So I think a lot of folks had trouble finding their role. What was their role in updating information? How many hoops did you have to jump through to do that? And will I be able to find it once it's out there? So all of those were things we really had to overcome. And then we were expanding at a really rapid pace. A couple acquisitions and mergers occurred, and we realized we didn't have kind of the right systems in place to get them up to speed as quickly as possible. So those were our initial drivers. And so the solution we went to was like Dewberry's. It was a technological system made for our industry, and it was really designed to address a lot of the issues that we talked about sooner. So that was a really easy decision for us to make. This is an image of our intranet, but I also call it our library of all things Mead and Hunt. But this was a very, very different system than anything we had in place before. And there was probably as much excitement about it as there was hesitancy. So this model really kind of gave us access to knowledge previously trapped under layers of searching and a lot of mystery that we had introduced to employees. So this was going to be a great, easy way to access information, but it also had this sort of social component that we knew people could use to document processes, share ideas, share best practices, kind of unite us a little bit more culturally. But it was a big change for us. We didn't have that sort of social component before, even as we were growing like we were. So really kind of here's where we had to identify our obstacles to entering more of a stronger knowledge management world. And there was a lot of cultural discussions there, and we realized we needed a significant shift. So some of our bigger obstacles, which of course you may recognize some of these in your own organization, is just kind of overcoming a lockdown culture, feeling of permissions, needing permission to submit information, to ask for things, trying to figure, who should be sending the emails and how should this be, and will leadership need to review this information before I get it out company-wide. And this sort of concept of silos, we have a lot of markets, varying markets that we serve, and folks, even though maybe what they do and how they do it could be shared across those markets, it wasn't being, that wasn't being done on a regular basis. So unless somebody was jumping from applying their work skills from one to the other, that wasn't occurring in a more efficient basis or an easier way for people to tap into. On the social side of things, so having this sort of stream that we could go through, people were really risking exposing kind of their weaknesses, maybe some vulnerability. So, what we were asking folks to do on the stream were to ask the right questions. If you don't know how to do something, or maybe the best way to do something, use the stream to ask, so that that information is available for everybody. And that was, obviously putting some people in a vulnerable spot. So we kind of had to overcome that. A negative impression of social at work. It was definitely not to our advantage to say that this was Facebook for the office. That was something that, had kind of a reputation, even 4 years ago or so when we did this. So we had to be careful how we presented that. And then, of course, overcoming this sort of concept of perfection before posting. I work with a lot of engineers, a lot of folks who want to make sure things are right before it goes live. And, information moves very quickly these days. And so being able to do that, post without having that feeling that I need to review it 10 times before it gets out there, or kind of being able to ask a question without making sure things are perfect. We knew that that was going to be something. It's still something, actually, I get a lot of questions about, or maybe get people saying, hey, can you review this before it goes live? But we knew that this was going to be sort of a barrier as well. So what we did in this case was really focus on loosening our communication style. So typically, company-wide communications tended to be a little bit more formal, and we wanted to talk about this new platform in a way that people would say, hey, this is for everybody to jump onto. I don't have to write a certain way, talk a certain way, share information even a certain way. I can participate in this. We wanted it to be something accessible. So one of the very first things we did was something fun to kind of encourage that loose formality in this public forum. So this is an image of actually one of our Halloween costume contests we did. Right when we got started, somebody had the idea to do that, and we just ran with it, and it got people very comfortable on the platform. And we're saying, if you could share comfortably in something like this, you can share comfortably in the work that's going to help us more efficiently and effectively serve clients. Those of us who were responsible for managing the intranet and managing sort of this library, these databases, as people were engaging in this more and more, we acted as rapid responders and validators. So our role was to make sure people knew that, hey, this was great, I'm so glad you put that out there. I saw you ask a question, I saw, a couple people respond, can you close the loop on that and tell us what happened, so that that information could be documented and used by other folks. And getting this up and running, one of the other really key elements that we did is we had kind of a super committee in charge, but we wanted to keep them out of doing all the communication, making all the decisions about the minor details, because we did want this to, again, revert from this thought that only a few are participating in this kind of sharing to this is just for the people, this is for everybody. And so while we do believe that there's kind of a leadership participation is extremely important and very valuable to validate and justify other people's participation in this, we definitely wanted it to be a tool for everybody and perceived as a tool for everybody. So our results were quite good. We had a bunch of campaigns to get information, and I think Molly mentioned some of that as well, that I'm a resource for, but to get some of that information, get project information filled in, get forms that people use on a regular basis updated and out so everybody could use them. Any campaign we did yielded really good results. We have about 70% of employees searching on a regular basis and tracking down this information on this intranet, on this library of all things Meet and Hunt, and that was something we'd never had in previous iterations. It's just with the lack of trust in those systems, now we have this, our system being the main part of the conversation. Have you checked on the station? Do you know if it's out there? Where could we find it? Where could we put it so everybody gets access? So it's great for that sense. And now, you know, we're developing a really strong strategy. So without starting from a strategy, but coming in and implementing one now, that's really exciting for us. I just want to point out we did have the woman at the top in the first post in the image that you see was a pretty heavy skeptic when we said we were going to go live with this, and the last person we thought would use it, and she's a great example of somebody who we just awarded internally for her efforts. In fact, she's, you know, in a finance role and has become kind of this business book guru, sharing information and getting people excited about things they could learn in some of our library materials. So that's really cool. And then, so just wrapping up some things that we've learned using our problems to our advantage. We're great. Problems are an excellent catalyst. Even better if you can all agree on what those problems are. And for us, we were able to do that. And it just made it easier for us to say yes to what could have been more of a risky solution. And working within a process that doesn't really impede progress. It was important for us to keep moving forward. We've implemented things before that have taken a long time, but I always feel like knowledge management's about speed, and info is coming in very fast, and we need to be able to wrangle that in a very productive manner. So we developed an implementation process that was sure to allow the progress to happen. And then making a case for acknowledgement really works in a very receptive environment. So identifying your current culture and seeking out what needs to shift, I think, is another tip I give. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Well, we're going to go to some questions now, and as I said, the first one was for Alex. So Alex, if you could tune back in. The question for you was, how many people, which disciplines were part of the project team, and was the process piloted with a small group?
Let's see, how can I describe that? I think very little of what I showed was a really short, like sort of chunkable piece of work that I would describe like that. So we've had a lot of different pieces, and I guess I'm wondering exactly which part of what we've done the question refers to. But what we, when we identified, for example, when we identified our knowledge assets, we had focus groups. I think we had 40 people from our organization, which is about 10% of our technical staff, our partner-facing work staff, and they came from over 25 business units, and they were mostly program managers and project managers. So fairly senior folks who had been around for a while, but we also gave other people and other people in the organization the opportunity to comment on the knowledge assets, and then we've circulated them. We've made them available on our SharePoint site, and I think it's still a work in progress. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily done. Now, later on in my presentation, I showed sort of a knowledge management platform that we've been building, but that's been an ongoing process for about 4 years now, and we are seeking, there's a small team of people that work on that, and we also have some developers, some in-house developers that work on it, but we are constantly collecting requirements, seeking feedback, testing new pieces of functionality, seeing what works and what doesn't. We've got great usage statistics that's really good for seeing what's working, but also great for making the case to management about how this is successful and about how and what types of needs that it's meeting in the organization. So I fear I may not have fully addressed the question, but maybe that provides a start.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I have another question. It said anyone can answer, but it came in while Molly was talking. So we'll let Molly go first if she wants to, and then if Alex and Kathy want to chime in afterwards, that's fine. It's kind of a long question. It says advancing a KM approach would necessitate building trust across the organization that the open system will build common and individual value. Though holding on to knowledge, wait a minute, I moved to here. Yeah, holding on to knowledge has been a defense mechanism for employees in some organizations. How have you successfully built up a necessary trust level of a successful KM system?
That's a great question. I'm saying that because I'm stalling as I think of an answer. Okay. You know, I think that like with any system, it supports best practices within your organization, or at least that's the ideal scenario, right? When you are looking to implement processes, systems, any kind of technology, hopefully you're going to apply them to areas where you're already seeing good results. I think that building trust of those who are interested in holding on to their knowledge and not sharing it has less to do with systems and more to do with creative approaches. I think that, you know, any organization might have pockets of this. Some of the things that we have looked at is finding trusting partnerships where maybe you have somebody who works with that person to transfer their knowledge maybe to someone who has who is maybe an up-and-comer, so to speak, in your organization. Make that more of a mentor-mentee relationship. I've seen firms that employ things like ethnography to witness, you know, what are best practices, what are some of the knowledge that can be collected from people who may be less willing to share. You know, that is a way to, I think, try to extract it. I mean, I think if you have someone who is going to hold on to it and not trust anything at all, I mean, that's kind of a bigger issue altogether. But I think that then, you know, once you can devise a solution to extract it, then you can think about how do you apply some of your knowledge management systems to what you've been able to pull out of those folks.
Okay, thank you, Molly. Thank you. We have one more question so far. Are there any KM implementation strategies you tried that didn't work?
I can, oh, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, no, go ahead.
This is Kathy, and we had, you know, what came to mind when you said that was just we had an issue with focus groups. Initially, we chose who we thought would be really good at giving us great feedback, but also we thought would be excited about it, and we chose these people based on maybe their experience with other pieces of software, other platforms we've implemented, and it turns out that that was a huge mistake on our part. Most recently we did a survey, another focus group, to kind of make some changes to our platform, but in addition, just, you know, kind of talking through some general information about knowledge management, and we let these people self-identify, and that was way better. And I think what you're looking for are the people who have kind of the passion for the project. There's a lot of process creation involved. There's some exercises involved that they can be tedious, and I think that you really want people who are passionate about it. You have to think a lot, really critically through all those processes. So you know, just letting people self-identify is something I would have done differently.
Okay, Alex, you chuckled, so you must have a story.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe this addresses both this question and the previous one. I mean, I think that last comment about letting people self-identify or letting the people that are excited sort of lead the way and start to demonstrate value. And I think ultimately, you know, going back to how do you deal with the trust issue, that's not something that we have tried to address head on for 100% for the organization. I think instead we're focusing on like a community-driven approach where people feel like they get more value out of being part of the community than not being part of it, and sort of leading by example, which I think ties in with that idea to let people self-identify and sort of lead and grow from there. The question about what hasn't worked, I mean, I wouldn't say we've had any like major failures, but I do think that we are at an inflection point in having to go back and revisit some assumptions or sort of what we thought were eternal truths about ourselves over the past couple of years. Namely, we're having a real question about burden and time. I mentioned that people are not going to prioritize the care and feeding of a system. So our approach really has been to collect a lot of information that's existing and put it together just to help people get a little bit further along than they would have without all of that information. But we're doing such a good job at pulling all this information together. Now people are starting to take notice and they're looking at it. And some people are saying, hey, this is great. Other people are saying, hey, that's not like, I don't like what that says about me. I don't like what that, even though it's business information and it's objective, people are saying, I want more control over how I'm viewed in the organization, which is legitimate. So I wouldn't say it's been a critical mistake, but I think it's all part of a process, and it's good to go back and revisit some assumptions and be able to be flexible and change as you need to.
Can I add one more piece?
Sure.
This is Molly. I think that's something that we continuously struggle with, and I think really underscores Alex's point that internal communications is knowledge management. Is you know, we build a lot of information, we generate a lot of content, but how do you even know that people are receiving it, and how do you know that it's contributing to their overall learning, development, knowledge, so on and so forth? And so I think that sometimes we just generate it and we push it out there, but we don't think about who needs it, who wants it, is your audience going to receive it, and how do they prefer to receive it? So this is a nut we still have not cracked, but we're constantly working on it.
Okay. We don't have any more questions, and we are out of time. So I thank you, Alex, Molly, and Kathy. And I thank everyone for tuning in. And I want to remind you we have the second part of this webinar is May 31st. Same time. If you sign up for it, you'll get a link just like you did today. And we hope to see you then. Thank you.